Wambua, moja kwa moja tunaanza katika kaunti ya Kisumu ambapo ni siku ya tatu sasa hivi ambapo kongamano la seneti ambalo ni bunge la kitaifa hapa nchini pamoja na magatuzi linaendelea katika kaunti ya Kisumu. Mwanahabari wetu Muremi Mwangi yuko kule, lakini sasa hivi moja kwa moja ningependa tufuatilie matukio hayo kutoka kaunti hiyo ya Kisumu moja kwa moja.
Presidential or parliamentary. The previous system that we had was a mix of the British parliamentary system and the American presidential system. The result was we had a president without checks and we had a parliament without teeth. So the solution we proposed when we created the 2010 constitution was a presidential system which is similar to the American system. We can talk about this later, but the key thing you want to understand about this, the difference. In a parliamentary system, the head of government, the prime minister, is not directly elected by the people. He is elected by members of the National Assembly or the members of parliament. In a presidential system, the president is directly elected by the people. Now, this creates a problem that we haven't experienced yet in Kenya, but I'm sure we'll experience one day. It creates a problem in constitutional law called dual mandate. What does dual mandate mean? Dual mandate means you have two political branches of government, parliament and the presidency, which are both directly elected by the people. In a parliamentary system, you don't. In a parliamentary system, you have only one political branch that is elected by the people, parliament, because the prime minister is not directly elected by the people. Now, this is the biggest problem in a presidential system. Why? See, when there is a conflict between the legislature and the presidency, there is no way of resolving that conflict by appealing to democracy. Because parliament says we've been democratically elected, and the president says I have been democratically elected. The problem you have in Venezuela now, where the parliament has elected their president and there is another president in office, is exactly the problem of dual mandate. And it's a very serious problem in constitutional law. I don't want to get into the details here. So how do we normally resolve these kind of problems in the presidential system? We impeach the president. If you are members, if you are representatives like you impeach the president, you withhold budgets, or the president resorts to emergency power. That's how you resolve those problems. All of those problems are extra-constitutional. They are not things that, no, they're not extra-constitutional. All of those problems are complicated. If you want to impeach the president in a presidential system, it's a very difficult process. The numbers are very high. So, I don't want to go into this. So, how do we reform the executive? The options available on the table are the following. You can have a pure parliamentary system, like they have in Britain, Germany, and South Africa. Or you can have a parliamentary system there are several models you can have. The first model is a parliamentary system with our electoral system. Our electoral system is a winner-take-all system. If you have 3 candidates running in a constituency, an MP gets 40% of the vote, another one gets 35% of the vote, another one gets 30% of the vote. The MP with 40% wins, although they don't have a majority of the vote. They don't have a majority of the vote because number 2 and number 3 got more votes than number 1 together. Do you see what I'm saying? That if the winner gets 40% and number 2 gets 35% and number 3 gets 25%, you have 60% voting against the winner. So that system is called a plurality system, and it's very wasteful, and we'll talk about it in a moment. Or you can have a parliamentary system like they have in Britain, which has a 2-chamber parliament, but only the lower house can pass a vote of no confidence. Or you can have one like Italy, where you have a prime minister, but either house can pass a vote of no confidence. Or you can have one like Germany, where you cannot pass a vote of no confidence unless you agree on the replacement. So in Germany, you can't remove the chancellor. You remove the chancellor, but you have to agree on an alternative. Okay? Or you can have a parliamentary presidency like South Africa. Or you can have a mixed system like Sri Lanka and France. We can discuss the options. The technical details can be discussed. But these are the options on the table. Okay? Problem number 2, the legislature. We have a 2-chamber parliament in Kenya, which has none of the benefits of a 2-chamber legislature. That's the biggest problem we have. Okay? What is the old problem we tried to solve? The old problem we tried to solve was we had a 1-chamber parliament, which was a tool of the ruling party. Because all you had to do to change anything in parliament was to call a party caucus. And then the party caucus would go to parliament and enact whatever they agreed. Okay? Now, And the parliament at that time was basically used by MPs to lobby for ministerial positions. It was a tool for lobbying. Now, so we proposed a two-chamber parliament in which the Senate would protect devolution, but would also act as a check and balance on the National Assembly. Now, the new problem is, as a result of poor design, the Senate is not performing any of the functions we thought it would perform. So what is the solution? The solution is this. We have directly elected senators who don't have the same powers as MPs. Now, in a two-chamber system, like Germany, like South Africa, normally what you have is the senators are elected by county assemblies or they are nominated by county governments because they are supposed to be representatives of counties. In a system like America, senators are directly elected, but they have the same powers as members of the House of Representatives. In other words, in Kenya, the problem we are facing is the following. Either we change how we elect senators so that the voting is aligned with their powers, or we increase their powers. My suggestion is that we should increase their powers so that they can play the role we wanted them to play, which was the role of playing as a balancing chamber for the National Assembly. Okay? I don't want to go to the details of how it works in other countries, but that is the option. The electoral system, the third issue. We have an electoral system that retains too much of the winner-take-all logic that we had in the previous electoral system. It doesn't achieve better representation. It doesn't achieve more proportional representation. And our goal is to achieve better representation and to achieve more proportional representation. Okay, I don't want to go into this, but the key thing is, when you have a system like the one we have, it is very wasteful of votes. It wastes votes because, remember the example I gave at the beginning, the 60% who voted against the 40% winner, all those votes are wasted. A proportional representation system ensures that all those votes are converted into a seat in parliament. That's what a proportional representation system tries to do. So you can have a system, you can keep the current system with its wastage, or you can have a new system with more proportional representation. Let me give you some quick examples. If you look at the election of Margaret Thatcher in 1983, the Conservatives got 42.4% of the vote, but got 62% of the seats. In other words, because they use a system like ours, there is no relationship usually between the number of votes you get and the number of seats you get. You can get very many seats from very few votes. Look at 1998 in Lesotho. In Lesotho, the opposition won nearly 40% of the vote, but got only 1 out of 80 seats in parliament. So this system is very, very wasteful and very unfair. Okay? Now, if you look at South Africa, just a quick example, if you look at South Africa, if you look at those two elections I have put up there, 2004 and 2009, you can see there is a very close relationship between votes won and seats won. 69.7% votes won, 69.8% seats won. There is a very close relationship. Now, so we need to debate this question as a country. There are many forms of proportional representation. I don't want to go into them right now. What are the reform options? The reform options is to keep the current system, or to have a full proportional system like South Africa, or to have a mixed system like they have in Germany. The most interesting question for me is, how should we choose the president? You remember the way we choose our president is that we have 50% plus 1. That's the person who gets that. You either get that in the first round or you get that. Okay. So there are very many options of choosing the president. I'll come back to them in Q&A. Now, issue 4, election costs. Kenya has the worst democracy money can buy. Because Kenya holds one of the most expensive elections in the world. If Kenyan elections cost the same as they cost in Rwanda, the government of Kenya would be able to pay at least 3 months worth of NHIF contributions for 6 million Kenyans. If we spend the amount of money that Rwanda spent on elections, let me show you what the numbers are. Elections in Kenya, the last year's election, they cost $36.7 per voter. who turned out, and 28.9% per registered voter. In Rwanda, they cost only $1.05 per voter, which was a very significant fall from the $1.7 per voter that Rwanda had spent in 2010. Elections in Kenya are costing 36 times more per voter than they cost in Rwanda. If you look at the other numbers, you can see the global average is $5 per voter. That's a global average. We are doing $6.7. Okay? So we need to address that. We need to have better oversight on election costs. We need to have inventory control of unused supplies. I was involved in electoral reforms in 2017. And one of the things we discovered is half the equipment that had been bought for the previous election was not functional or was missing. So we are very wasteful.
Two minutes. Two minutes,
okay. The last issue, the role of political entrepreneurs, parties and party primaries. The problem is that parties have owners, who I call political entrepreneurs. And in over 80% of the cases, the owners determine who gets elected. Parties are the most effective tools for frustrating the will of the people in Kenya. And the thing to remember is that elections in Kenya cannot be free and fair if the primary mechanisms for elections, political parties, are as compromised as they currently are. Now, political parties are mere electoral vehicles in Kenya. That's what they are. So, how do we go about creating credible parties? One of the reform options is to have a credible IEBC, which is a big challenge. And the challenge isn't constitutional. The challenge is actually operational and administrative. To create a credible IEBC. But you can't create a credible IEBC so long as the interests of the commissioners are aligned with the interests of incumbency or the powers that be. You're not going to create an independent IEBC that way. So we need to start thinking about how to create an independent IEBC. And one way we can influence parties is to have their parties tied to having their elections supervised by a reformed IEBC. Thank you. This is a lot heavier than I intended. There is a lot more we could talk about, but on constraints of time, let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Presenter. Keep the mic. Wachira Maina never disappoints. Yeah, from political problems, profiteers, political entrepreneurs, and all. We now go to the section of the reactions from the panel. And I'll start with Senator Mtula. You're a practitioner. What is in it for the Senate? What is in it for the county assemblies?
Thank you.
All right? 5 minutes, Senator.
Thank you. To be or not to be, Shakespeare once asked that question, do we need a referendum or not? And I'll be brief, but I'll put my presentation in terms of questions because all of you understand the questions. I'll put the question, do we actually need a referendum to have the reform we need? Question. What are the amendments? Question. Can we do hybrid amendments? That is a question. And is the Building Bridges initiative building bridges or digging holes? Question. I've had people speak about the referendum, and I'm satisfied when they speak about the referendum, they have not read the Constitution. When they say you're going to have a referendum this year, it's like when they are saying Santa Claus is coming for Christmas. And what the reason is this. If you look at the Constitution, before I get into the areas, a bill for the amendment of the Constitution will commence either at the Senate or National Assembly. Number one. If it is published and read in the first reading, you will not commence with the second reading until the expiry of 90 days. That is both National Assembly and Senate. If you start doing the calculations, that is already 6 months, both in the National Assembly and Senate. Are you going to have a referendum this year? Good question. After that happens, the president is supposed to send it to IEBC, who are supposed to have a referendum within 90 days. That's another 3 months. If you do the calculations, we have already overrun the time for doing a referendum. The second issue, a referendum under Article 255 can only be on the 10 issues that are in Article 255. One of them, and I'll concentrate on only two, functions of parliament. Do you need a referendum to have a deputy prime minister and a prime minister in the question of functions of parliament under Article 255? It doesn't say structure. It talks about functions. Devolution, which is something that I want to talk about because it's a pet subject. Object of devolution. Under Article 203, we the Senate have already amended and have a draft that says in Article 203 that national government should remit not less than 40% to counties of current revenue. Do you actually need a referendum to amend Article 203? That is my question. You don't need. So that is something that we can achieve. It brings me to the third issue. Is it possible to have a hybrid amendment? Means those issues that will require a referendum, like we have pointed, and those who will not need? Good question. Because when the president sends the questions for the referendum, the only 2 or 3 issues that I think that will be in this referendum is objects of devolution, number 2, object and structure of devolution, number 2, functions of parliament, number 3, term of office of the president, and possibly functions of parliament. 4. So in the Building Bridges initiative, the questions we expect from them are possibly the 4. The rest, supremacy of the Constitution, I do not think they want to touch those issues. Bill of Rights, etc., etc. This forum, the summit, is the biggest collection of legislators in Kenya. That's number 1. I expected that in this platform, that's why I'm disappointed by the executive, by not showing up here, that you would ask, because the Okoa Kenya draft had the word fund in it. Is it possible that we can structure the ward development fund in division of revenue in an amendment to the Constitution? If the answer is yes, why hasn't the assemblies represented here prepared a draft for discussion either at Senate or the Building Bridges initiative? Munangoja nini? Na munangoja nani? Because it is a fundamental question. CDF, Constituency Development Fund, is under something we call national interest in the budget of this republic. This country is divided into 47 counties under Article 6. Development in counties can only be done in wards. So having a ward development fund is not a contradiction of the Constitution. It's just the way you structure it. And I think it's something that ought to be discussed. If you increase the power and the money, because resources that are follow functions under Article 187 makes governors more powerful, are we going to let the governors, the executive, to run away with the money at 40% and leave the county assemblies the way you are, as weak as you are, as complaining spirit as you are? The answer is no. We must first of all strengthen the primary oversight organization in devolution, and that is the county assembly. If you are listening, you would say amen.
Wrap up, Senator.
The second one would be the Senate. What Wachira Maina talks about is correct, that we compromised the structure of the Senate, yet it's supposed to protect devolution. As I wind up, because there are many things we can do to protect and uplift the work of the Senate, including following the Australian example of allowing the budget estimates to be debated in the floor of the Senate. Even if we do not amend them, we can make recommendations like the Australian Senate. If it's national debt, we want to tell Kenyans. It concerns counties, because national debt now has become the first charge on the consolidated fund. It must be discussed at Senate if we are going to truly protect this country, because this country involves counties. Therefore, it is my humble view, because the timelines that are in the Constitution are so strict, the election of 2022 is known. If the Building Bridges initiative does not work very quickly, we will not have constitutional reform as we want it. Because the constitutional reform must be followed by legal amendments. The A to Z of the constitutional reform must be given. So, and the last one is the threshold of passing the Constitution. Because I believe now we cannot do a popular initiative under Article 257, we will do it under parliamentary initiative under Article 256. How many members do you need in the Senate? 42. How many do you need in the National Assembly? More than 230. In the current political climate that Wachira Maina talks about, Kieleweke, Kutangatanga, and others, are we building consensus? Are we polarizing the country? Will we get the thresholds or not? That's why I asked the question, is BBI building a bridge or digging a hole? Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Senator Mtula. Good questions. Chairman Kaf, in your final points as you depart, you'll have to ask your members, do we have a position on the referendum? I think that has been done very well. My next panelist, Madam Kagushia from the Gender Commission. Madam Josephine, the Senate is fully compliant in the gender issues. The county assemblies are fully compliant. I don't know about the National Assembly. My panel is compliant in terms of gender. Over to you. Tell us, what do you think about the referendum?
Okay, thank you.
5 minutes.
Okay. So the CS, Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Omalwa, and all the legislators, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present on behalf of Commissioner Honorable Priscilla Nyokabi, who ought to be here making this presentation today, but because of unavoidable circumstances, she was not able to, though she was here for the pre-summit on Sunday and Saturday. And we're looking at the Commission, we protect the interest of the special interest groups, those ones that the media do not care about, those ones that do not get any voice in this country. And these special interest groups are the persons with disability, the youth, women, minority and marginalized communities, the children, and also the elderly. So we are saying we are following implementation of the Constitution, and we are only for protecting the gains that have been made by the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And in particular, we are looking at the 2/3 gender rule, that is Article 27 on equality and freedom from discrimination, and H1B as well on the 2/3 gender rule. We are looking at the gender parity in employment in the public service, as given in Article 232. And we are also looking at 5% employment of persons with disabilities in Article 54, and youth access to employment in Article 55, and the 70-30 rule by the County Government Act at the counties. So the Commission proposes that every county implements all the above provisions and considers policies geared towards promoting equality and freedom from discrimination of special interest groups. And key among them would be legislating on gender mainstreaming, policies and laws, looking at the PWD's Act and policy and implementing it, and inclusion of minorities. And we are saying, in the event that there is an opportunity for constitutional review in Kenya, as the Commission, as we give our views to the Building Bridges initiative, the Commission has identified key areas which are in need of reform for protecting the special interest groups. And these areas are inclusion of the youth. We know very well Article 55 does not give an immediate threshold or a threshold that can be measured, and it just talks about giving legal provisions that youth can be mainstreamed in the employment and also in the appointing. And we are saying as a commission that we are proposing measurable reservations, let's say of 20% of all elective and appointive positions for the youth, and the provision of legal threshold which can be supported and promoted with strict qualification of a youth as being 18 to 35, not more, not less. So on inclusion of women, we are saying women have not been fully involved in governance, and while the Constitution provides for affirmative actions, women participation and involvement, the same has not been fully adhered to in all sectors, and we know all these sectors, both in appointive and elective. And we're looking at the area of constitutionalizing of the opposite gender rule in elective and appointive positions in Kenya. And we are also looking at legislating on the 2/3 gender rule, and we are recommending that immediate actualization of Article 27, Subarticle 8, and Article 81, Subarticle B, and insulating the process of nomination from political process by entrenching the principles and procedures of nominating women in the Constitution. We have just heard that political parties belong to individuals, and these individuals are certainly not women. So we need something on that. So the Commission further recommends that the procedure of nomination should be an election that allows citizenry participation in electing their women representatives, as opposed to leaving the nomination to political parties. We are also looking at constitutional silences on the 2/3 principle.
Wrap up.
While we appreciate that the Constitution has been explicit in application of 2/3 in some areas, we also note that the Constitution is silent on the same in certain areas. For instance, the membership of the National Cabinet, and this has hampered inclusion of women in cabinet and indeed public spheres. For instance, with the enlarged current cabinet as compared to the first term of President Kenyatta, the women inclusion has reduced instead of progressing upwards. And this has been aided by the constitutional silence on membership of the cabinet and other positions like the judiciary and the public service. And we are recommending that we should promote effectively inclusion. The Commission also recommends removal of constitutional silences in appointive positions, and we are also looking at compliance with the provisions, because this is an area that has been failing us. On inclusion of persons with disabilities,
1 minute.
We note that the Constitution provides for 5% progressive, and at the Commission, we are saying, should there be a review of this Constitution, that word progressive should be removed. And on the same, we are also proposing electoral colleges where persons with disabilities will be electing their persons that they want to represent them both at the Senate, at the National Assembly, and also at the county assemblies. We have a formula. We need to attain the 5%, and we should be giving this later. So for the term, we are also proposing that the term of the nominated persons with disabilities should not be more than 2 terms. Once someone is elected by the respective categories, that is the persons with disabilities, and including the youth, they should go for a maximum of 2 terms. We are also looking at the sign language. We note that this is a requirement under the Constitution, 54D, but we are lacking this in most of our public and private institutions, and we would like this implemented effectively so that now we can aid communication between service providers and also the recipients. On inclusion of minorities and marginalized groups, we are looking at the county, and especially at the county level, we are looking at the county government acts, and we are proposing that this particular section be implemented where the 30% of non-dominant communities are employed in the counties. And we are saying in all these debates of constitutional review, even if we want to punguza mizigo, we should first of all protect the gains that we have made, the gains that have been brought by this constitution, and then now we start talking about punguza mizigo. Because if we are too sincere with ourselves, we can even talk about reducing the number of constituencies if it's punguza muzigo that we want. And that way, we'll also achieve 50-50 gender parity if we are only to elect 2 members of parliament at the county level, 1 woman and 1 man. And that is all for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause for Josephine Kagusha from the Gender Commission. We need to look into the formula for putting, electing, nominating members to the county assemblies and all the other bodies. My next panelist, Speaker Kaberia from Meru. What is in it for the county assemblies? What do you think? What are the assemblies saying? What are your people saying? Karibu sana. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, moderator. I will utilize my 5 minutes well. I know very many issues have been raised, but allow me just to highlight the interest of the county assemblies and the citizens at the grassroots in the constitutional discourse. I know this is a matter which can take even like 2, 3, 4 days, but we'll just try to highlight a few issues so that we move on within my 5 minutes. So I have classified my presentation into 2 parts. As I do that, allow me to welcome the Right Honorable Speaker of the Senate, who has just joined us. Welcome, Right Honorable Speaker of the Senate. Yes, that has taken me 1 minute. On the part of the county assemblies, let me say that county assemblies have a lot of interests on this constitutional discourse, debate which is going on, because firstly, county assemblies are institutions created by the constitution of this country. And of course, through the principle of devolution. And I will just state broadly that on behalf of